Okay, today is the Yortzeit of one of the greatest scholars of the past 200 years, one of the most famous scholars, by the name of R Chaim of Volozhyn, R Chaim Brisker. It's his Yortzeit today. Yesterday is the Yortzeit 80 years of the Rebbe's father, the Levik. So today's topic is Brisk and Lubavitch. Brisk and Lubavitch. And before we even discuss who Reb Chaim was, his background, his family, his position in the world of teaching Torah, he was known as the Rosh Yeshiva of the Rosh Yeshivas. You know, you have the Master of Masters, the Star amongst stars, and you have the Rosh Yeshiva amongst Rosh Yeshivas. Not only he was the Rosh Yeshiva amongst Rosh Yeshivas, he was the Rosh Yeshiva of many Rosh Yeshivas. Many of his students in the next generation literally, you know, were the famous big guns in all the big yeshivas on the other side of the world. Before we even get to Reb Chaim's background and his life story, to start off with a certain activity of his, just to get a bit of a picture. Because his activities and his Torahs describe him more than his background and his history. Number one is the Ramah in the laws of Purim, right? So we know that Purim falls on the 14th of Adar, and the day before, we're fasting, Taanis Esther. If Purim falls on a Sunday, when do you fast? The day before is Shabbos. You can't fast Shabbos. So when do you fast? What's our custom? Tuesday. Thursday. Good, I'm sorry. Thursday. We fast Thursday. So that's what's ruled in Shulchan Aruch.
Only Tanya Esther or the same thing we thought about?
Well, how would it work by the other ones?
So the place is Sunday.
If it falls on Sunday, you go on Thursday? No. If in theory, if it fell on a Shabbos, the Avud Raham says that you would do on Shabbos.
Fast on Shabbos.
According to Avud Raham, yeah. Anyhow, but the issue here is with Purim falling on Sunday, so then the fast on Shabbos goes back to Thursday. If Shivasa B'Tammuz falls on Shabbos, we fast Sunday. But you can't do that by Purim. How are you going to fast Sunday? It's Purim. You're going to fast Monday? Right, that's the issue only by Purim. So that's the halacha ruled in Shulchan Aruch. You fast on Thursday. Comes the Ramah and he throws in a bizarre halacha, if we could say so. Number one, v'imchol Purim b'yom rishon. If Purim falls out on Sunday, shemis'anin b'yom chamishi shelafanov. We fast this Thursday before. V'chol boy bris milah, but there's a bris on Thursday. Okay, Taanis Esther that year is on Thursday. It was pushed back, and there's a bris. Mutter lechol imam milah. Whoever wants to join the bris can join the bris. Not only the father of the boy and the moyel and the sandik, anyone that looks at those that lox and cream trees and can't hold themselves back. There's never a better day, right, to partake of a bris than a fast day, and you're laughing at all the people. You're allowed to partake. The issue is the joke's kind of on you, because now you have to fast Friday. Ulamacha the next day, b'yom shishi on Friday, yis'anu ha'eichlim, those that eat should fast. That's what the Ramah paskins. The Taz has a problem with this psak, because the fast was instituted for Thursday. You can't make it up on Friday. You know what? If there's a bris, enjoy today, make it up tomorrow. What's Friday? The fast was instituted it was for Thursday. The takon is Thursday. You don't have the right, the liberty to partake of the bris and do makeup on Friday. What does Friday have to do with Taanis Esther? It's the wrong day. But many achronim say that we actually follow the Ramah in this case. So what's Taka the Pshat? What is Taka the Pshat in this Ramah that eat on Thursday, make it up on Friday? What's Friday? So the truth is, historically, there was a major debate in the times of the Rishonim about 800 years ago, what to do when Purim falls on a Sunday. Do you fast on Thursday or Friday? I understand you can't fast on Shabbos, it's Shabbos. You can't fast on Sunday, it's Purim, so you got to go back. Why do we go back 2 days to Thursday? Fast Friday? Asar B'Tevis falls on Friday, you fast the whole day. You know, there is an idea you fast the whole day until you make Kiddush, till nighttime. So why wouldn't Taanis Esther be on Friday? So the truth is there was a major debate. The Rambam was of the opinion that it goes back to Thursday, And in generally, the Chachamim of France said it goes back, the Chachamim of Spain, said it goes back to Thursday. The rabbis in Provence, in southeast France, said it's actually Friday. The Meiri, who lived in Perpignan, which is in Provence, says you actually fast on Friday. And in generally, the rabbis of Provence, of southeast France, unanimously pretty much held you actually fast on Friday. It was a big debate. There was a big debate between the rabbis of France and the rabbis of Spain.
When did the Halachic debate?
What?
What's the last?
Oh, hold on. I'll get that. Hold on. So, although the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Kaira Paskins, you go on Thursday, that's what the Rambam held, that's what the Rosh, the Torah's father, held, who also lived in Spain the end of his life. But now you understand where that Amos is coming from. Since many hold the fast is actually Friday, Nish Gefährlich is not so bad. If you're going to partake of the bris on Thursday, you can make it up. Friday's a random day. It's not so random. According to many, that's the day you're supposed to fast. In the world of Brisk, and we'll discuss who the world of Brisk is soon, there is an explanation explaining the two opinions as follows. When purim's on Sunday, so Taanis Esther's Shabbos. You can't fast Shabbos. So the question is like this. Do I say the fast that should be Shabbos, you can't do it on Shabbos, so it falls to the nearest opportunity that you have? In other words, the same fast usually would be on Shabbos, which is the 13th in this particular year. You can't do it, you bring it back a day. It's the same fast, it just kind of topples over to the nearest opportunity. Then it would be Friday. Another option is, if it falls on Shabbos, the fast has been eliminated. The regular fast of the 13th is out, because you can't fast on the 13th of Shabbos. But the rabbis, the Chacham, don't want us to go a year without fasting, so they said, you know what? We want you to fast, we're going to choose our own day. So then they're at liberty to choose Thursday over Friday. Why should they choose Friday? Fasting Friday has issues. There's a reason why the rabbis of Spain said, don't fast on Friday. You come into Shabbos starving, you know what Friday night looks like on Asar B'Tevis. When you're fasting at the Shabbos, the davening is not really a davening. The Levush says, how will you cook for Shabbos if you can't taste the food? Is a proof a chef has to be able to taste their food. If a chef does not taste their food, nishkin chef, right? Don't trust a skinny chef. If a chef doesn't taste their food, then nishkan chef. It's a levush. The levush says, if you're going to fast on Friday, you won't be able to prepare for Shabbos because you won't be able to taste the food. Now that's not a reason to cancel a fast. But if the pshat is the regular fast has been terminated because you can't fast on the 13th, so the Chachamim now are saying, you know what? This year we don't want to go a year without fasting, so we're going to create a new a special run for this year. So then they're at the liberty to choose Thursday over Friday. They're not bound to the 13th anymore. That's how in the house of Brisk they explain the debate. Is it the same fast just at the closest opportunity? Then it's Friday. Or is it a new fast?
If it's a
Now,
new fast, what is it?
it's no Zeicher for what happened for Tanya Esther.
It's
It's the same rabbis who said to fast in the first place. The Chachamim.
Can you fast for Bukhorot?
What? It's only from the Chachamim to fast Tanya Esther in the first place. So the same rabbis said in such an instance, you do it on Thursday.
What the chiluk?
What?
What the chiluk is?
Yeah. What is
Can
it?
you fast for the Bukhorot, Pesach, before the Pesach? On Friday, for example.
Okay, so you know what? That might be a similar debate. Yeah, what?
If you mix a chiluk between this and this.
Okay. Let's leave, because this is just an introduction. Let's leave this. Okay. So how does this relate to the great Reb Chaim Brisker? Listen here. If Purim would fall out on a Sunday, and we fast on Thursday, that's the fact the Shulchan Aruch says you fast Thursday. The Ramah's caveat is if there's a bris, you make it up Friday. But you'll chatchila fast Thursday. Reb Chaim wouldn't let himself take an aliyah. Reb Chaim Brisker would not allow himself to be called up to the Torah. He wouldn't take an aliyah. Maybe it's not really Taanis Esther. Because of the debate that there is, he wasn't so sure. He would fast Thursday, because that's the custom. You would assume by Mincha, some suggest it could even be by Shachar, because it's the wrong laning. You shouldn't be doing Vayachal, you should be doing the weekly thing. What are you doing, making a bracha on the wrong laning? The wrong laning. But definitely by mincha. So I don't know, either he would like casually walk out, or he would bury himself, or busy himself, or the place knew that Reb Chaim doesn't get an aliyah. So who is going to get an aliyah? Maybe there's no laning in Brisk. No, that it doesn't say. But you just see, this is a classical Reb Chaim. That, if he would refuse an aliyah, you'd say, what are you doing? But there's always, in Brisk, there's precision. Everything's very precise. And there's always a cheshbon to everything they did. Okay. Reb Chaim Brisker, he's born in the year 1853. He lives for 65 years. Not that long, 65 years. He passes away, in 1918, right after the First World War. In 1918, he passes away. And in order to understand his place in the Fruma world, you got to know where he comes from, his background. It all starts with a fellow by the name of R Chaim of Volozhyn. R Chaim of Volozhyn is considered the star pupil of the Vilna Gaon. R Chaim of Volozhyn was around the same age as the Alter Rebbe, 4 years younger or so, but roughly the same age. R Chaim of Volozhyn, when he was younger, he merited to learn by the greatest scholars of the day. He learned by the Shagas Aryeh. When the Shagas Aryeh was younger, living in Volozhyn, he taught Reb Chaim. In fact, there's a well-known story, I've said it before, that before Reb Chaim was born, his parents were living in Volozhyn, and it was not a wealthy town, to say the least. No one had a full set of Shas. There was one couple that had a set of Shas, or almost a full set. They stood out, they were unique. And one night, the Shagas Aryeh, the Rav of the city, knocks on the door and he says, I need to borrow 2 Masechtas. So the husband says, listen, generally there's a rule one at a time. But for you, it's like when you buy an esrog, right? For you, you could take 2. Exactly. I was holding it special for you because no one else would have paid as much as you're going to pay. And Reb Chaim, so the Shagas Aryeh takes both of the Sforim, the 2 Sforim of Shas, and he tells the husband, the same way you allowed me to take 2 Sforim of Gemara, Hashem should bench you with 2 children that will lighten up the world. And the parents had 2 kids, Reb Chaim and a brother Reb Zalman, who's known as Reb Zalman of Volozhyn or Reb Zalman of Vilna, who was a genius. He died Nebuch, a young man, and but we know a tremendous amount about him. He knew every single sefer he was able to get his hands on. They said he knew off by heart. There were those that said that the Beis Yosef, which is a set of psalm like this big, you would start a paragraph and he would just rattle off the paragraph for you. Mama's like otherworldly. We'll get there. Gedult. So this Reb Zalman Nebuch, he passed away early. It was on Shabbos, Reb Chaim of Volozhyn was sitting with his contemporaries, and they spoke about his brother Reb Zalman. And someone said, Reb Zalman was mamish like a second Vilna Gaon. And Reb Chaim said, Chas v'shalom. Don't say, my brother's a great man, but don't say he was like my Rebbe, the Vilna Gaon. And people, they were astonished, why such a sharp reaction? And Reb Chaim said, even if my brother would have lived for 1,000 years, he wouldn't be on par with the Vilna Gaon. Which was he knew everything off by heart. So if he lived for 1,000 years, there's nothing he wouldn't know. So they asked they asked Reb Chaim, maybe you mean in depth and sharpness. In other words, for that Vilna Gaon was in a different stratosphere. Reb Chaim said, no, I mean in expertise. In Bekiyas, in expertise, he wouldn't have been like my Rebbe. So no one understood what he meant. Your brother knew everything off by heart. So Reb Chaim said, you guys know Ashrei off by heart? They said, yeah. What comes before the word Yoducha? Let's do an exercise here. What comes before the word Yoducha? Masav. Okay, can I ask you how you figured out it was Masav? Because you went back to test. So Reb Chaim said, this is the difference of my brother versus the Vilna Gaon. My brother knew everything from the beginning to the end. Like you know Ashrei. You don't know Ashrei backwards. If you knew Ashrei backwards, you would know right before Yeducha, you would see it, is Masav. You know it from the beginning to the end, so you have to go back to test. Tov Hashem lakov rachmo kamasav. If you would know it from the end to the beginning, it would just be clear in front of your eyes before Yeducha is Masav. That's the difference of my brother. For 1,000 years he would study, he would have incredible expertise, but from the beginning to the end. The Vilna Gaon is a different type of expertise. It was he saw everything he knew, he saw in front of his eyes, he could go backwards as well. That was the example of R Chaim of Volozhyn, the famous Ashrei story. Anyhow, R Chaim of Volozhyn learned under the Shagasarya. He also learned under the Rafal Hamburger. The Rafal Hamburger was originally one of the great students of the Vilna Gaon. And then Rebbe Fall, he was in Mezrich. He had a run-in with Chassidus, and he was favorably impressed. He went back to Vilna, and the Vilna Gaon said, I don't want you to have anything to do with those Chassidim. So he was torn, because he had a soft spot for Chassidim. He saw it, and he, on the other hand, his Rebbe, the Vilna Gaon, forbade him to join the Chassidim. So he said to himself, you know what? I'm not going to go to the Chassidim in deference to the Vilna Gaon. But I'm not going to visit Vilna either anymore. And he left, and he ended up going to Germany, to Hamburg, as is known as the Fall Hamburger. So he said, you know, I won't go to Mezrich, my Rebbe doesn't let, but I'm not hanging around Vilna anymore either. Exactly, he became a... So R Chaim of Volozhyn studied under him as well. And ultimately, Reb Chaim learned under the Vilna Gaon, who was his main teacher. And Reb Chaim is considered the prime student of the Vilna Gaon. Although years later, Reb Chaim of Volozhyn wrote that I know people say that they quote me and they hashtag my name, student of the Vilna Gaon. He said, Ach Rachmanis. He said, I'm nothing compared to my Rebbe. I don't deserve to carry the name of my Rebbe on me. The distance between us is so great, you can't truthfully call me a student of the Vilna Gaon. He was a very humble man. So this Reb Chaim of Volozhyn, so he was a major Talmudist, a major Kabbalist as well, and he wants to open a yeshiva. Around the year 1800, just before, the Vilna Gaon passes away in the end of the 1790s. So in the mid-1790s or so, Reb Chaim of Volozhyn approaches his Rebbe, the Vilna Gaon. I want to open a yeshiva. And the Vilna Gaon, he pours cold water on the idea. A year later or so, Reb Chaim is with his Rebbe, and he says, Rebbe, I really want to open this yeshiva. So the Vilna Gaon said, if a year later you still are so passionate, it's coming from the right side. When an idea comes from the left side, so there's no truth to it, so it's here today, gone tomorrow. But if a year later, 2 years later, you're still so passionate, it must be this, it's coming from the right side, from the godly soul. And he said, go ahead, open a yeshiva. And Reb Chaim opened the famous yeshiva in Volozhyn, the famous Volozhyn yeshiva, which is known as the mother of all yeshivas. Okay, in Lubavitch we refer to Tomchei Tmimim as it's the only yeshiva, the yeshiva, our yeshiva, but this is predating Tomchei Tmimim by 100 years. And this was the mother of all yeshivas at that time in the Litvische world. You know, it's like the Frierdiker Rebbe describes in the beginning of his memoirs. The city of Lubavitch, just saying the name Lubavitch, awakened feelings of fantasy and nostalgia. So too in the Litvische world, just saying the word Volozhyn, it's like a magical city. And it was because of Chaim of Volozhyn, who was the personality that he was, and this yeshiva. And this yeshiva, the students in this yeshiva, each of them was they became the leaders of the next generation.
The Baalai places didn't have yeshivas the same way?
L'chayra not. Let's say that for another shir.
The type of yeshiva was very different.
Yeah.
The type of yeshiva before Volozhyn was like a kahila yeshiva. It was based on communities. This was based on like today's yeshivas.
Right, accepting Bachrim from all around. People, they tried to get in, you had to get fahered. To get fahered by the Chaim of Volozhyn. First of all, some guys would travel thousands of miles, literally, or maybe hundreds of miles, even though they didn't know if they would get in, just to get a yechidus with Reb Chaim, just to get fahered by him, even though you may not pass the faher, just to have that experience with you for life. And I sat with Reb Chaim of Volozhyn, he wiped the floor with me, and that's it. And you were proud of that. You were proud.
What were they looking for?
The main thing was learning. There was no mucking around. It was learning, but you had intellect. But Reb Chaim was an erlich yid. And we'll get back to that soon. So Reb Chaim has his famous yeshiva, and then he passes away. He passes away in Volozhyn. Reb Chaim, being the prime student of the Vilna Gaon, you would think would be a big misnagid like his Rebbe was. However, the Frierdiker Rebbe explains that in Vilna there were generally two sects amongst a group of misnagdim. There were those that were going to take down Chassidus no matter what the cost. And then there were those that truly felt that Chassidus may be a threat to Yiddishkeit, and until it was verified that Chassidus is kosher and pure and holy, until they verified that, they were concerned and they questioned, but they were out for the truth. The difference of the two is, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, as Chassidus became more grounded, as it became clearer that the Chassidim are great scholars and they're God-fearing individuals, the first group intensified. They became more afraid that the Chassidus is here to stay. They intensified their opposition. The second group, who were in it for the truth, became calm. They said, okay, there's nothing to worry about. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says, R Chaim of Volozhyn belonged to the second group. And so as time went, he became more and more of a friend. There was in fact and he particularly had a soft spot for the Alter Rebbe. And in number 2, I have a copy from Rabbi Yaakov Kadaner, who was a chassid of the Mittler Rebbe. He wrote a sefer called Sipurim Noiroim. Awesome stories. And this Rabbi Yaakov Kadaner learned in Volozhyn when he was younger. So he knew Reb Chaim from when he was younger. And he writes in number 2, he testifies, the Gam Kisha Yisi be Yeshivas Tachkamuni, but when I was in the yeshiva of wise men in Volozhyn, I was B'Shabbos, Samuch al Shulchan HaTorah Shel Agoyin Reb Chaim Anal. This is first-hand testimony. I was sitting at the table of Reb Chaim Volozhner. The Gam Anshe Shiva G'dol Yisham. There were other men from the Yeshiva G'dol. That means maybe the Hanhola, the staff, or other Bachrim. The Amar Hagon Torah. What do you think happened at his table? They weren't talking. He said Torah, and on the halachas of Shloisha Sha'achlu. The Achakach afterwards Nafal Beneim Dibur. Then they started talking about the depth of the Chassidic Rabbanim. It was a positive conversation. All these Misnagdim singing together. Reb Chaim at the head. But like we said, Reb Chaim had a somewhat, at the time, definitely a favorable disposition towards Chassidim, somewhat. Ad Shebo Adibur, they spoke about the Mechus of Admun Ishmaseh, and they started speaking about the Alter Rebbe. It's in Volozhyn, it's Shabbos, Reb Chaim Volozhyn is the head of the table, there's all those colorful people all around.
Nobody's recording.
Well, they're recording in their mind. Back then, they recorded in their mind. He says, Shamati mi piva kodesh, I heard from his holy mouth, Bazeh Aloshin. Reb Chaim Volozhyn said the following: May inyan gedulas Torasai, the Alter Rebbe's greatness in Torah, we can't even speak about. Yoduali hatev, I know for a fact, he says, she gedulas Torasai hu adin, the Alter Rebbe's knowledge and understanding of Torah, it's limitless. Achzeh, one thing I'll tell you, his chacham is mamish, the chacham of an angel of God. And with his wisdom, he could be Dabar Hador, that means the leader of the generation on every country. The Alter Rebbe could have been the leader of the entire Jewish world. That's what Chaim Volozhyn attests to. He was right, yes, he was right, but he did meet the Alter Rebbe. After the Vilna Gaon passed away, Reb Chaim Volozhner at some point felt that he had a very difficult halachic issue and he needed to speak it over with someone. And he traveled to the Alter Rebbe to speak over the issue with him. Yes, we know for a fact he traveled to the Alter Rebbe, and that's why he says of here, I know for a fact. He saw it. There was once a chassid traveling through Volozhyn, a guy chassid the Alter Rebbe. He was there for Shabbos. Reb Chaim heard there's the Alter Rebbe's chassid here. he sent word to him, you have to come to my table Friday night. I want to hear one of the Mamorim the Alter Rebbe said. So he was a fan of the Alter Rebbe. And we continue in number 3. Rabbi Yaakov Kadana continues. From Volozhyn, I traveled Asisi Masa. I went to the Admur in Lubavitch. I went to the Mittler Rebbe. And my travels took me through Borisov. Umatsasi Sham, I found there, as a muflug, I'm a very famous scholar, the Chassid of Yosef, who's the nephew of R Chaim of Volozhyn. So R Chaim of Volozhyn had a nephew who was a Chassid, okay, Rabbi Yosef. V'siperli, and
Wasn't R Chaim's wife from a Chidushim family? I think so.
R Chaim of Volozhyn, and R Chaim Brisker's mother was. I don't know. Okay. V'siperli, he told me like this. Shebishah she'ala b'rtzoyna. So the nephew who became a chassid told this Rabbi Yaakov Kadaner, when the nephew wanted to join the chassidim, lo yad la'an, didn't know which group to join. I want to become a chassid, but there's so many different stripes and colors, right? Imla Rav de Lechovitch, should I join Lechovitch or Liadi? It happens to be that the Rebbe of Lechovitch was an antagonist towards Chassidus Chabad. The Rebbe of Lechovitch was a great Rebbe, but he was one of those that were known, outspoken, upset about the Alter Rebbe revealing, was that the Alter Rebbe had no limit to the Chassidus that he would teach. So they were like two sides of the spectrum, and this guy wasn't sure where to go. And he asked his uncle Reb Chaim, because he knew that Reb Chaim knew both of them. So Reb Chaim knew both of them. So his uncle Reb Chaim said like this, my child, my nephew, if you listen to me, if you really want my advice, don't go to either. If you want, don't go to either. Stay in Volozhyn. But
he himself was going to Lubavitch.
No, that was by the Alter Rebbe. He went one time to ask, not to learn he went to discuss, have halachic discussion. Here, when you're going as a bacher, it means you're going to take their path for life. When you go visit somewhere for a Shabbos, you're observing.
Inquiring.
Yeah, here going there means you're going to become a chassid. He said, "Really, I'll tell you not to go to either, but I know you won't listen to me on that. That's not what you asked me for. For that you don't want to hear my opinion. So therefore, I'm going to tell you, you should go to Ritzonin, and my true will is you should go to the Rav Hagon of Liadi. Go to the Alter Rebbe. Why? Because I know why you're joining Chassidus. You're not joining them because you want to learn. You could do that in Volozhyn. You're not looking for a deeper pshat in a taisvus. You're looking for a doctor that can heal your soul. And I know the Alter Rebbe is an expert doctor for the medicine of the soul. That's testimony of R Chaim of Volozhyn. So, for his times, he was definitely considered somewhat of a friend. And in number 4, there's a letter of the Rebbe. This was a letter that we mentioned a number of weeks ago. We had a shir about the original tzimtzum, right? The black hole shir, the shir of black holes. And the Rebbe mentioned in number 4, the shita of Baal Mechaber Sefer Nefesh HaChaim. Reb Chaim Volozhyn wrote a sefer, a little on Kabbalah, called Nefesh HaChaim, and that you mentioned b'michtavai. He holds like the third opinion. Reb Chaim Volozhyn held that when God contracted his light, it's not literal, means God only concealed, but it's both the light and himself, and see that 2-hour shir for more details about that. But continues the Rebbe, V'cholak bazel Rabbi Chaim Volozhyn disagrees with his Rebbe, the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon held that the contraction was literal. God not just concealed, but removed himself. Ubichlal, the Rebbe throws out, he conjectures, he says, near it appears to me, Reb Chaim Volozhyn saw books on Chabad, particularly Tanya, and he was affected by them, although I don't know this with certainty. So the Rebbe said, I can't prove this, but my gut tells me that Reb Chaim Volozhyn learned Chassidus, specifically Tanya. If you look at number 7, join me number 7 at the bottom. This is from the Sefer Torah Shleima, from Reb Menachem Kasher, who was one of the greatest scholars a generation or two ago, and he was in New York in the end of his life, and sure. So he writes the following. He has a little piece where he talks about the tzimtzum and if the Eibush is can you say Hashem is here, Hashem is truly everywhere? And he says, Talmidoi, the student of the Gra, of the Vilna Gaon, R Chaim of Volozhyn, although he respected his Rebbe mamish like he was a Tana, but concerning this detail, he did not follow his Rebbe. And he says, V'chol ha'over, but anyone that passes through and analyzes the third gate of the Sefer Nefesh HaChaim, you will see clearly that he saw Tanya, and he received the Shitta of the Tanya, almost in all details. And you even have some exact expressions. V'yesh sham mamish oisen halashayin, it's exact expressions in Tanya. Elo, just he adds some sources from Chazal to explain the opinion. And for example, over here, R Chaim of Volozhyn brings from Medrash Rabbah, Ein makom poner b'lo shchina. That's a source Alter Rebbe doesn't quote. But Medrash Rabbah, there's nowhere where the Shekhinah of Hashem isn't, to prove the fact that God's everywhere, although he may be concealed. So he says a fact, he learned Tanya, and he even copied. Now there are those that believe that R Chaim of Volozhyn, part of what motivated him to write the Sefer was to cool people off from feeling the urgency to learn Tanya. You need those ideas here in Nefesh HaChaim. You don't have to learn them from a Sefer of Chassidus. I'll supply them to you over here. And by taking mamish, the expressions themselves, he really sold. He had a good deal. Whatever you want there, you find over here. Okay, so it's a sinister theory. There are those who have said that over time. And but nonetheless, this is R Chaim of Volozhyn. Just to show you his greatness in learning, look at number 5. During the times of R Chaim of Volozhyn, there was a great scholar by the name of Rabbi Akiva Eger. Rabbi Akiva Eger lived in Posen, in Poland. Rabbi Akiva Eger was a little younger than R Chaim of Volozhyn, but he was already famous for his Talmudic analytics.
And Eger in Hungary, Eger.
Eger is a mountain in Switzerland. In the Alps. I don't know. Listen, what should I tell you? He lived in Poland. Shepam huvu liyudei Rabbeinu Hagoyin Reb Chaim Volozhyn Zatzal. One time Reb Chaim of Volozhyn was given a tshuva of the Goyin Rabbi Akiva Eger. Rabbi Akiva Eger's letters are very deep and exact, and they're perfect. And Reb Chaim of Volozhyn observes the letter, and he expressed himself, and he said, the response itself I could have done myself. The difference is I couldn't start my letter by telling the sender I received your letter yesterday. I couldn't write the word I got your letter yesterday. For me it would take much longer to put together such a perfect answer. Rabbi Akiva Eger was able to put such a perfect response on the spot, and he could start off his letter by saying, I received your question yesterday. He said, but to arrange these responses al-asar, on a whim, on the moment, to answer me, that I couldn't do. The esmol higiya sha'alasa, that I could, to start the letter by saying, I got your question yesterday, that I couldn't do. So, this is the great Reb Chaim of Volozhyn, okay? Reb Chaim of Volozhyn passes away, and he has a son by the name of Yitzchak, Reb Itche of Volozhyn, and he succeeded his father in running the yeshiva. Rabbi Itche, we know for a fact, was on very good terms with the Tzemach Tzedek. The Rebbe himself, they traveled together to Peterburg. Many stories between the two. Rabbi Itche learned Chassidus. In other words, we have much more evidence. By Reb Chaim of Volozhyn, it's conjecture. In Tanya and say Nefesh HaChaim, you have similar expressions. By Itche of Volozhyn, there's testimony. People, I guess, saw him learning. He learned Chassidus without a question, and his friendship with the Tzemach Tzedek is undenied. And the Rebbe used to make mention of that. This Reb Itche of Volozhyn passes away, and he was succeeded by his son-in-law, the Netziv, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin. That's what it stands for. And the Netziv. And the Netziv was a famous scholar of his times. He was an incredible masmid. He learned day and night. And he wasn't known. Okay, I have to be careful with what I say over here. The greatest Rosh Yeshivas were lav davka the sharpest people amongst their contemporaries. But it was sometimes the effort they put in, you plant, you reap fruit. They toiled in their farming. One? Exactly, and they reaped fruit. Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman, maybe we'll get to later, who was killed Nebuch in the Holocaust, he said about himself that he didn't feel that he was the sharpest amongst his contemporaries. No. But he put himself towards his learning, and the Eibishter helped that he developed a path in learning. And they say the same thing about Reb Shimon Shkop, that some of these people, their success was not through nature but nurture. They toiled and sweated and exerted themselves. And the Netziv was known as that type of scholar. Obviously he was a smart man, but he toiled and he labored. Now he amassed incredible knowledge. He was an incredible baki, his expertise, and he became, and that's why the Itch of Volozhyn took him as a son-in-law, right? He didn't just take anybody. The Netziv learned in Volozhyn as a bocher, and he was, Itchel observed him, and he took him as a son-in-law. So the Netziv is now in Volozhyn. Okay. Now, R Chaim of Volozhyn, from his daughter, he had a great-grandson, whose name was Yosef Doiv, Yashaber. Yashaber. Yasha is a play on Yosef, and Ber is Doiv. Yashaber Soloveitchik is his name. He's known as the Beis Halevi. The Beis Halevi, and he's going to be the father of the Brisker Dynasty. The ancestor of the Brisker Dynasty is the Beis Halevi. And the Beis Halevi was a great-grandson of R Chaim of Volozhyn. He was known, what?
From his mother.
From R Chaim, Yashaber's father was a grandson of his father's mother. His father was R Chaim of Volozhyn. He was a great-grandson of R Chaim of Volozhyn. And he was famous as a genius. He was a natural, very sharp, he was gifted. And he was offered to get a job in Volozhyn with his cousin. The Netziv is his cousin. The Netziv was a little older, and he was already the Rosh Yeshiva at the time, the main Rosh Yeshiva. And the Beis Halevi was invited to come and be second, the deputy Rosh Yeshiva.
What year are you now?
The middle of the 1800s, mid-1800s. And it became evident that there was a big difference between the style of learning of the Netziv versus the Beis Halevi. The Netziv Shiyurim were very much focusing on pshat, on the simple understanding with depth, but thorough understanding of whatever piece of Gemara you're learning. The Beis Halevi, though, he was magical. His sharpness, the brilliance, and Volozhyn was attracting students with a very keen intelligence, and naturally they gravitated towards the Beis Halevi, and it caused friction. It caused a rift, to the point that it got so bad the Beis Halevi had to leave. Rabbanim got involved, big Rabbanim got involved, and they sided with the Netziv. Okay, he was there first, and he's also a generation. The Beis Halevi is a great-grandson of Reb Chaim, and the Netziv was a son-in-law of Reb Itcha, so he was in line to succeed. So the Beis Halevi left. That was the end of his career. And
Reb Elchanan, one of the three, or not?
B'chanan, which Yitzchak Elchanan?
Yeah.
No. He's Reb Chaim Brisker's Talmud. So the Beis Halevi was out, and he moved to Slutsk, and he opened up a yeshiva there. He was so famous, the Rogachover came to learn in Slutsk by the Beis Halevi. When the Rogachover was young and was already a genius, he went to learn by the Beis Halevi in Slutsk. Now the Rogachover later in life never spoke about my Rebbe's, but the fact is, he learned by the Beis Halevi, and he learned together with the Beis Halevi's son, Reb Chaim Brisker. Reb Chaim Brisker is the son of the Beis Halevi. He's generation number 2 in the Brisker Dynasty.
How is it the Rogachover didn't know all these Achronim? He studied in the Chassidus.
The Rogachover didn't know these Achronim. Well, actually at some point, somebody asked the Rogachover if he knows the Ktsois HaChoshen. And the Rogachover knew the whole thing off by heart, because he learned it when he was younger, and he remembered it forever. When he got older, and the Rogachover realized that he has the goods to be on par with the Rishonim, so then he no longer was nispol. What?
How is it that he didn't know Reb Kiva Eger's name is father?
I don't know what he did or didn't know.
My father used to...
And okay, well, what happened with the Ktsois HaChoshen? They say he knew the whole thing off by heart. Somebody once came into the Rogachover's office, and they were speaking, and it came up a certain halacha of Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and this guy knew that the Rogatchover didn't hold of anybody. So this guy felt he could talk loose about Rabbi Akiva Eiger. And the Rogatchover got up and gave him a smack, a frask on his cheek. And he said, who are you to talk about a Talmud Chacham like that? He threw him out. He gave him a frask, a pasha threw him out of his office. So it needs a study on its own, what the Rogatchover's attitude to other contemporaries was. However, this is in Slutsk, so you have the Beis HaLevis in Slutsk. His son Reb Chaim was young. The Rogatchover came to learn there. Later in life, the Beis HaLevi moved to Brisk. Hence, it's called the Brisker Dynasty. He moved there later in life, and he became a Rav, and that's how the city of Brisk became linked to this Soloveitchik family. A quick story about the Beis HaLevi. Look at number 6. This is the Friedrich Rebbe tells over a story in a Sikha. The Friedrich Rebbe tells over, Mir zu verstehen, what happened was, somebody asked Rabbi Yasher Ber Soloveitchik, the Beis HaLevi, explain to me. So was matter to sich? Why do you toil? You're teaching shiurim in complex halachas of Tumah and Tara, and you're giving the shiurim to great scholars, a guy called Beryl the Harb and Kalman de Klotz. Someone asked Yasher Ber, he was giving a shiur to some great scholars about complex laws of Tumah and Tara. And someone asked him, what's the point of this exercise? And he gave a famous response. In the second paragraph of Numbers, he said like this: you understand? As ich sag dem Pilpul farz, if I tell this Pilpul to these great scholars about the laws of Tumah and Tara, then in the other shul down the road, there'll be a notch lower. They'll learn regular Gemara. Und in jener shul sagt man Gemara, so then they'll learn Gemara. In another shul, they'll be in a lighter level. In a fourth shul, they'll learn Mishnayos. Und jener geht 3 Mal a Tag davenen, and then that certain guy is going to come daven 3 times a day. And then the guy beneath him will go to shul at least in the morning. And another guy, the guy below him, will go on Shabbos. And below him only goes on Yom Tov. Bis jener dem Abtaker Zun will only go to Shana Yom Kippur. Then the lowest rung, at least.
So you identified reform.
He said like this, if I don't say the Pilpul, we all go down a rung. This is what's going to happen, he says, famous, right? What's going to happen, if I don't say this Pilpul, I learn regular Gemara, then everyone goes down a notch. Then the last guy is not going to go to Shul Shana Yom Kippur. He said then, in the other shul down the road, they're not going to learn a blot properly, they're going to go down to simple Gemara. And then in the other shul, they won't even learn Mishnayos until the last guy won't even go to Shul Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. He's quoting, but in brackets he says, but he'll fast. In the Litvischer world, they quote the story that he ends up saying that guy's kid is going to shmadzich, is going to convert. When the Friedrich Rebbe told the story, he said, what's going to happen is the last guy will still fast Yom Kippur, we won't go to shul. But this is the idea. This is like brisk. Brisk, if you had to summarize it in one word, is precision. Everything is precise. Everything they said, anytime they would define a halacha, an idea, a legal law, something in Gemara, it was about precisely defining what exactly it is. You know, the Beis HaLevi's son, Reb Chaim Brisker, whose Yortzeit is today, he was once invited by the Chafetz Chaim to go to the city of Radin and faher the Bachrim. The Chafetz Chaim is the Mishnah Brewer, go faher the Bachrim. So Reb Chaim came, and he was fahering, the Ilui, the great scholar amongst the yeshiva. And the Bacher wants to impress Reb Chaim Brisker, so he takes out his thumb, right, and he starts saying, you know why the Eibishter said this and this is prohibited? It's because of this and this. So Reb Chaim says, Shah! You don't have the right to say farvos, nor vos. You don't have the right to say why God said something. The only thing you can say is what did God say. In other words, God gave a mitzvah. Back in the day, you could look for a reason. The Tanoim, there's something called Doirish Time of Dekra. Rab Shimon would look at the pasuk and explain the reason why God said this, and based on that decide where and when it applies. The Sefer HaChinuch gave reasons for mitzvahs. The Rambam and the Moreh Nevuchim. Says Reb Chaim, that ship has sailed. That train is long gone. No longer do we have the right to say why God said you can or can't do this or have to do this. What we can do is define exactly what God said, give parameters. What exactly is the halacha? What is it exactly that God said? I'll give you some examples of what that is. In Brisk, everything is precise. All of their customs were precise. You see, the Beis Halevi said, there's a perfect ladder tier over here, and the moment I go down a notch, boom, 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 and that guy won't go to Shul on Yom Kippur. That's a story the Frierdiker Rebbe quoted by Fabrengen about the Beis Halevi. Fine, so that's the great Beis Halevi. By the way, there is a story. He was once sitting with the Rebbe Maharash. The Beis Halevi once with the Rebbe Maharash. This story has more versions than there are grains of sand on Miami Beach. There are about who it was with and what exactly happened, but one of the versions, which has been printed many years ago in a sefer, so it's part of a legend at least, says that the Rebbe Maharash was sitting with the Beis Halevi at one time, and a certain medrash came up, a difficult medrash. The medrash says about a pasuk by the Akedah that the story of the Akedah tells you, Adam doyig al damav ve'enoi doyig al ibud yamav. A person is worried about their money, but not about their lives being wasted. Right? No. Adam doyig al damav. A person is worried, or ibud damav, and they're not worried about losing their days. And what's the connection? Well, let's say it comes from Montreal, whatever. Okay. The question is, what's the connection? That and the Akedah. So apparently the Rebbe, now there's many versions about the story, but one version is the Rebbe Maharash said like this: Damav could mean money. Damav could also mean blood. Yitzchak asked his father, Tata, where's the lamb? You know what Yitzchak was worried about? Yitzchak was a firstborn to his mother, right? He's a bechor. When you shecht a firstborn animal, you only throw the blood one time. Like we say before, ha-bechor only gets matana achas. You throw the blood one time. An oila, a sacrifice that's an oila, gets shtayim shehenar, but you throw it twice on two corners of the... So Yitzchak said, I'm a firstborn. Even if I get shechted, only a little bit of my blood should be sprinkled. Only one spraying. But Hashem told you to bring an oila. Yitzchak said, where's the oila? You're going to bring me? Then more of my blood is going to be spilled. So that's what it means. A person is worried al dama. Yitzchak was worried about how much blood would be spilled. He wasn't concerned about the fact he was going to be killed. And the Beis Halevi said, wow, such a pshat could only come from heaven. Now, there's many versions to that story, but that's one of the versions.
It rhymes too.
Yeah, and it rhymes too. So, the Beis Halevi has a son, Reb Chaim Brisker. And he's called Reb Chaim Brisker, first of all, because his father was the rabbi of Brisk. The Beis Halevi passed away and in Brisk, ended his life in Brisk. And Reb Chaim was also ultimately going to be a Rav in Brisk for many years as well. Reb Chaim married the granddaughter of the Netziv. The Netziv of Volozhyn had a son-in-law, Rabbi Shapiro, Rafal Shapiro. He had a daughter who married Reb Chaim. So Reb Chaim Brisker was now part of Reb Chaim Volozhyn's family from two sides. He himself, it's his grandfather's grandfather, and from his wife's side, it was her Zayda as well, Baba Zayda as well. So he was invited by his Zayda, the Netziv, that, it didn't work out between you and your father and myself. How about you come and join me? By the way, the Netziv reached out years later to the Beis Halevi, come back, we'll figure it out. The Beis Halevi said, no, it didn't work, and that's why I ain't coming back. So the Netziv tries again with Reb Chaim. And Reb Chaim agreed, and he came to Volozhyn. It was more peaceful between Reb Chaim and the Netziv. First of all, there was much more of an age gap. So there was the senior scholar, the junior scholar. They weren't contemporaries butting heads. In addition, Reb Chaim's married to the granddaughter, so it's family. But you did have the same problem. Reb Chaim was as brilliant as his father. And the same problem did arise, that the students who were looking for brilliance and wanted to be dazzled went to Reb Chaim's shir. But it was able to work out because they weren't contemporary, they weren't similar age. Zayd and Einokul, people were able to choose. And it worked out until the yeshiva of Volozhyn ended up closing by the government, and that's a whole story on its own. At which point, Reb Chaim goes back to Brisk, and he becomes the famous Reb Chaim Brisker. Just like his father was a Rav there, he's a Rav there too. And Reb Chaim really created a new derech in learning, a new path in learning. In throughout the frum world, it's known as the Brisker path. The Brisker path. It kind of started with his father, but Reb Chaim really paved it out. His father had a small yeshiva in Slutsk, and then he was a rabbi in Brisk. Reb Chaim was in the Volozhyn yeshiva teaching this new path to many, many students. So he had much more of an effect, right? Reb Chaim was in Volozhyn for many years. He taught the giants of the next generation his whole path of learning. And throughout the frum world, it's known as the Brisker path. And there's lots of jokes poked at it. There were many big Litvishers who didn't hold of the Brisker path of learning. And it's actually interesting that in Lubavitch we have a strong respect for it. The Rebbe often quoted Reb Chaim Brisker, and Reb Chaim Brisker himself was a close friend of both the Rebbe Rashab and the Frierdiker Rebbe. Reb Chaim Brisker, before we see a couple more things, Reb Chaim Brisker, just to know the family, had a few sons. One of them was Velvel. Yitzchak Zev, but he was either called Itche for Yitzchak or Velvel, which is a Yiddish spin on Zev, right? A little wolf. And he was called the Griz, or the Brisker Rav, because he was also a Rav in Brisk, or the Velvel of Brisk. And Reb Chaim had another son called Reb Moshe, who was the father of J.B. Soloveitchik, the famous friend of the Rebbe in Berlin, and then he was in Boston. So J.B. is a grandson of Reb Chaim Brisker. And you see how the Brisker family, they come from two sides. They come from Reb Chaim of Volozhyn.
Meir Bar Ilan was his son.
Oh, yes, he was. I don't remember which brother, but yeah, one of the brothers. So, in fact, J.B. Soloveitchik said that they have a tradition that they have from their the Volozhyn side of the family. We know the Alter Rebbe came with Reb Mendel of Horodok to visit the Vilna Gaon to talk with him and to try and make peace, make sense of the situation. You have questions on Chassidus? Let's talk it through. Let's have a rational conversation. And we know the Vilna Gaon, he didn't let them into the house. Reb Chaim of Volozhyn said that the Vilna Gaon was actually convinced by his mother not to let them in, whatever that means. And he jumped out a window of the house and he ran. But Reb J, what?
Meir Bar Ilan was Reb Chaim's brother.
Brother, okay. So J.B. Soloveitchik says they have a tradition from the Volozhyn side of the family that when the Vilna Gaon got the knock on the door, he looked through the keyhole or something and he saw a glimpse of the Alter Rebbe and the Mendel Horodoker, and he said their faces were shining like angels. He says, I knew if I let them in, then I'm going to end up walking out with them holding their hands. And I was afraid that would happen, so I jumped out the back. So it's funny, the Misnagdim, they deny the story, but it's not our story. It's not a Lubavitch story. J.B. says the story. It's actually taped. It's recorded. And he says he has it from the Volozhyn family tradition. Yeah, but our tradition is that it was Reb Mendel. Our tradition, it was Reb Mendel. So if you look in, So look in number 8. I want to tell you a few little. I want to expose you a little to some of the sharpness of Reb Chaim, the brilliance of his. You know, when he was a kid, 5 years old, Reb Chaim was playing outside the house and he got all muddy. And he comes and his mother screams and says, Chaimul, what are you doing? You're all muddy, you're all dirty. You ever see me like this? He says, no, I didn't, but I'm sure your mother did. He was a sharp kid. Listen to this. By his bar mitzvah, many people came from across to be by the bar mitzvah of Reb Chaim. So Reb Chaim told his father, the Beis Halevi, wow, so many people heard about me, I'm only 13. All these people came from across the country by my bar mitzvah. So his father, the Beis Halevi, said, don't get so excited. That's not because of you. It's because of me. They came for me. So Reb Chaim said, then many more people should have come. He said, that's because of you. So this is like classic Brisk discussions.
That's great.
It was once on Pesach, it was before Pesach, the Beis Halevi, the father, he went to make matzahs, but as a brisker, they went absolutely berserk in the matzah bakery. Any small question, he went nuts. And he was never satisfied. He was always worried that he missed this, missed that.
18 minutes is not enough.
Every small chumrah. So the Beis Halevi left the matzah bakery. He was walking down the road and he was in a bad mood. He was not happy with his matzahs. He meets another Pashta guy going to the matzah bakery. So the Beis Halevi asked this guy, what do you do special when you make matzahs? So the guy said, I say, Eibishter, please, I'm a simple guy. Please help that my matzahs should be muhudah, should be special matzahs. So R Chaim felt this guy is a simple Jew. The Eibishter for sure hears his prayer. He said, could we switch matzahs? So they switched matzahs. So the Beis Halevi came home and he was all happy. So his son, R Chaim, said, Tata, what are you so excited about? She tells him what happened. He said, so R Chaim said, the Eibishter Taka answered that guy's prayers. So they, yeah, and Kahena, he was, in fact, look at number 10. Number 10 is actually from the Rebbe in the Rishimus. The Rebbe writes in his diary, R Chaim of Brisk used to tell over Maisis mit Tzadikim. R Chaim Brisker was not a Chassid, but he used to tell over stories of Tzadikim, of Chassidish Rebbes. And the Rebbe says he was a Ish Chacham Ma'od, a very wise man. He was once on the train and a missionary approaches him and tells him that maybe Yoshki is the Mashiach. Why are you so sure? And he tells Reb Chaim, Rabbi Akiva was so sure that he thought he knew Bar Kochva was Mashiach, right? Rabbi Akiva thought Bar Kochva was the Messiah, and Rabbi Akiva was wrong, so maybe the rabbis are wrong. So Reb Chaim said, who said Rabbi Akiva was wrong? How did Rabbi Akiva was wrong? He says, what do you mean? Bar Kochva was killed. That was it. That was Reb Chaim's, in other words, how Yoshka was killed too. So he was a Chacham Ma'od. And the Rebbe quotes a story. Sipper, Reb Chaim once, look at number 10, he once told over at a gathering in Petersburg, Al Dvar Tzens LaRabim. The government wanted that the rabbis all had to be recognized by the government. Certified, and that there was certain, what? Exactly, Rav Mitam. It could be that to speak Russian. There was basic knowledge they would have to acquire. And Reb Chaim got up and he spoke and he said, it's a dover you do, it's known that if you heard Reb Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev say Keser on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, whoever heard Hayapoika that cars, people unable to have children would have children. By hearing Reb Levi Barditchev say Keser on Rosh. Hold on. No, this is Reb Chaim Brisker telling over, a Litvisher guy, telling over a story about the Barditchever. Unexpected. And then Reb Chaim said, I have a source in Shas. He explained how he has a source in Gemara for this fact about Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Barditchev. And he explained the proof, and there were two Lubavitches there, Reb Mendel Chaim, Rabbi Yitzchak Yoel Raflovich, V'nispalov, and they went out. They were floored. They were floored by what Reb Chaim. So Reb Chaim had an affinity towards Chassidish Rebbes, Chassidish Maises. It happens to be there is a legend that Reb Chaim's son, we said Reb Velvel of Brisk, the Brisker Rav, once said, and I don't take responsibility. This is just a legend that they say. He said like this: My Zayd the Beis Halevi, he loved Chassidus, but not Chassidim. My father, Reb Chaim, loved Chassidim, but not Chassidus. And I don't tolerate either. He was known as the son, the Revelva was more of a misnagid. But that fits with Reb Chaim. He loved talking about tzaddikim, and he did love Chassidim, it's a fact. He loved the Rebbe Rashab and the Frierdiker Rebbe. And this person called Mendel Chaim, there was a fellow called Mendel Chaim, and from the famous Chaim Lubavitch family, who was an incredible mind, a great scholar. And the Rebbe Rashab relied on him the Rebbe Rashab would take him on his travels to many of these government meetings. And Reb Chaim spent time with him, and Reb Chaim very much desired to take Reb Mendel as a son-in-law. Reb Chaim Brisker wanted to take Mendel Chaim as a son-in-law.
Is he very wealthy? He funded some of the travels also?
No. The story goes that Reb Mendel's father, his name was Reb Hersh, Reb David Tzvi Chaim, sent his daughter to spend some time by the Brisker family to see what the prospective Kala is up to, see who the other girl is. She went there and then she comes back home and she told, this is Mendel Chaim's sister, she tells her father about, you and Reb Chaim, your Asher Yotzar is deeper than his Kriya Shema Lamita. That was the comment that she said. Listen, Reb Chaim was a man of Torah. He wasn't influenced by Chabad Chassidus. He loved Chassidim. He didn't really learn Chassidus. In fact, I think J.B. Soloveitchik once said that Reb Chaim once harassed him about learning Chassidus Chabad. But Reb Chaim definitely loved Chassidim.
When he was going to college, his father told him that Reb Chaim should rebuke him. So he went inside. He said, "Since I see you going to college, learn Chassidus. That's good." And you think your father should think that I'm screaming at you. Wait in the room a little bit longer, and then go on. So you should learn Chassidus.
So okay. I heard another legend. Maybe it's wrong. Fine. So join me in number 8. Amar to Gemara in Sanhedrin said Reish Lakish, whoever appoints a judge on the community who's unfit, it's as if he planted an Asherah, an Avodah Zarah tree amongst the Jewish people. Because in the beginning of Parshas Shoftim, it says, Shoftim v'shoitrim titan lecha, you should supply judges. And right after it says, don't plant an Asherah, don't plant a tree that you intend to worship for Avodah Zarah. God forbid. So Reish Lakish says, you see, if you appoint a judge that's unfit, it's like an Asherah tree. Reb Chaim Brisker once said, what's the pshat? What's the connection? He said, an Asherah tree is a tree that's worshipped as a deity. He says, but if you look at the tree, it looks exactly like all the trees around it. If you look at it from on the exterior, it seems to be exactly like everything else. The fact that it's been corrupted, you can't tell to the naked eye, it's on the inside. He said, so too, a judge who isn't fit, he walks the walk, he has the clothes, he talks the talk. Inside they're corrupt. It's very hard to detect. And he says that's why the Gemara compares that to the Asherah. That's something he once said, which besides for explaining the Gemara, probably had more meaning. He might have been referring to some people that he had. Although, when he was taken as the Rav in Brisk, he said, I don't want to be asked about all the questions day in, day out. He appointed somebody else, Reb Simcha Zelig Rieger, to be the rabbi of Brisk. So you had the rabbi of Brisk, Reb Simcha Zelig, and the Rav of the city, who was only bothered when at harsh questions, was Reb Chaim. By the way, Reb Chaim his house was a public train station. Reb Chaim Brisker's home was full of guests, poor people who nobody else would look at them. They stayed in his house. There were times he gave up his own bed. And he slept who knows where, on the floor somewhere, for guests. In fact, people knew that if there was a child that a family couldn't raise, or something wrong with, some issue with the child, they would place the child on the doorstep of Reb Chaim's house. Many times Reb Chaim's door would open, there was a little baby there. And Reb Chaim would bring the baby in, and he would hire wet nurses. And then his whole operation going. In fact, one time he comes home and this wet nurse came and said, Rebbe, I haven't been paid for a week. I can't do this anymore. Reb Chaim said, oh, how much is it? He quickly ran, he got the money, he gave it, and she was still panting. He said, here's the money, but please don't feed the kid yet. Wait till you calm down. It's not healthy for the kids. You're frazzled, you're a panic attack, calm down. In fact, they used to call these kids Reb Chaim's Mamzerim. They nicked them as Reb Chaim's Mamzerim. Many of the kids were placed there because the parents were unable to raise them. But it could be that some of the kids were placed there because no one wanted to own up. And they were nicknamed Reb Chaim's Mamzerim, but he took care of them. They were his kids. In fact, before Reb Chaim Brisker passed away, he said, on my matzeva, don't write anything about my learning. Just write Ish HaChesed, a man that did kindness. So on his matzeva it says that, man of kindness, then it speaks about his learning. But the first thing they wrote was about his chesed.
You only get this from
So when did he live?
Where do you get this?
Because I'll tell you why. Reb Itcha of Volozhyn writes that my father, R Chaim of Volozhyn, used to tell me, you think you're in this world for yourself. You're not here for yourself, you're here to help the people around you. Rabbi Itcha of Volozhyn said, my father used to tell me, and Rabbi Itcha was a very nice guy throughout his life, so you assume when he was younger as well. But it wasn't enough for his father, R Chaim of Volozhyn. He said, you think you're here for yourself? You're not here for yourself, you're here for the people around you. Now it's interesting, because once R Chaim of Volozhyn is giving a shir, and a bacher walks in late, R Chaim of Volozhyn says, what happened here? The bacher says, I just saved the person's life. So R Chaim said, Nebuch, you would have been better off being by the shir and someone else saving the life. It's a Gemara in Megillah. Gedoyle Talmud Torah. Okay, all Hatzalah members to close your ears. Gedoyle Talmud Torah Yortzeit Matzalas Nefashos. The Gemara says, learning Torah is greater than saving life. Now, of course, you have to save a life. But Reb Chaim said, if you would have been Zeicha, somebody else would have saved the life and you would have been here by the shir.
It doesn't say that in the Gemara.
Sure, Megillah. Sure it does. What does it say? Sure, what does it say? It's talking about Mordechai being demoted. That although he was demoted in the list. Check the Gemara. We'll check it up. But so the Litvishers love to quote that story. You see that story happened, but the fact is, Rabbi Itcha says, my father told me, you think you're here for yourself? You're not here for yourself.
That's the Hashem's way of
Right. So it was in their family. So Reb Chaim Brisker grew up with that you're not here in this world for yourself. Even though they, not from Chassidus, but they got from other areas of Torah, that you live your life for others. He was mamish. Reb Chaim's mamzer. It's a beautiful, it's a beautiful expression. He had patience for everyone. So, you ever notice? Yeah. You ever notice when you say hello to someone, you say Shalom Aleichem, and what do they say back? Aleichem Shalom. Why is that? It's based on a Gemara in the Dorim Daf 9, in number 9. Exactly. That's what the Rebbe wants. Look at number 9. It's a Gemara in the Dorim. How do you know Shaloi Yomer Adam? A person shouldn't say, if you want to designate a carbon to the Eibishter, you don't say, for God I'm bringing this as an oila, or for God a mincha, a flower offering, or for God a taid, or for God a shlamim, peace offering. You have to say the other way around. This is an oila for Hashem, a mincha for Hashem. The Eibishter's name has to come afterwards. Says the Gemara, how do you know that? Talmud Loim, in the beginning of Vayikra, it says, Adam ki yakriv mikem, karban la Hashem. First you say karban, then you say God's name. Now the Gemara, well, what's the reason? So, many understand that if you say the word la Hashem, who said you're going to finish your sentence? What if you faint, God forbid, what if you die? You'll never finish the sentence. So you said God's name for nothing. So first you have to say, Oy la Hashem. So then it's a full statement. And the Gemara says, if this guy, if someone says Hashem first and the Nebuch doesn't manage to finish the sentence, he's a good guy, right? God just took him early. He was not miskaven. He had in mind to say God's name on the carbon. And yet the Torah says, no, you got to be careful to say carbon first. Imagine someone stam says God's name in vain. That's what the Gemara says. So there's a medrash. Now, I didn't find this medrash, but it's a medrash quoted where it says like this. Adam ki yakriv mikem karban la Hashem. The pasuk. Hadu hu d'chsiv. This is related to the verse in Psalms. Yameinu kitzel over. Our days are like a fleeting shadow. That's a statement in the medrash. And all the commentators want to know what's the connection between the verse in Psalms, our days are like a fleeting shadow, to the pasuk of bringing a carbon. So Chaim Brisker said, it's this Gemara. Adam ki yakriv mikem. First you say carbon, then you say la Hashem. You can't first say Hashem's name and then carbon, because you're worried you might die mid-sentence. What? We're so worried someone might die so suddenly? Yeah! Yameinu kitzel over. Our day is like a fleeting shadow. You don't know when you're going to go. That was a word that he gave. So some said based on that, that's why I like this. Listen to this. Shalom is Hashem's name. The Gemara said in Shabbos, Shalom is Hashem's name. How could you tell someone Shalom Aleichem? What if you don't finish the sentence? You said God's name in vain. There's an idea, if you are makdim Shalom, if you say hello to someone before they say hello to you, you get long life. Kol amaktim shalom lechaveira, you get a long life. So there's no concern you won't finish. But the guy responding doesn't have that guarantee. So he has to say aleichem shalom. Okay. So this is, you see, this is brisker precision. Brisker precision. Yeah, well, now in Brisk, they were famous for their chumras. Reb Chaim famously, on a fast day, if somebody was ill, or sick, or not feeling well, break your fast. People broke, if you wanted to eat on a fast, you went to Reb Chaim Brisker. And people asked him, Reb Chaim, you're so careful in all areas of halacha, and by fast days you throw it out the window. He said, what? I'm not lenient on the fast, I'm machmir in health. It's a chumrah in health. And there was a brisker, was once Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, and he wakes up, he has a headache, he said, that's it, I'm eating. And he makes for himself some food. His wife says, and she was fasting, his wife said, what are you doing? She says, you got to take care of your health. He turns around, she sees she made herself a huge pastrami sandwich, and with vegetables, and with mayonnaise, and with mustard, and she's eating. He says, what are you doing? She says, I'm not feeling it. He says, since when did you become so machmir? But Pesach and Brisk is mamish, every chumrah you could imagine. They say there was a Brisker guy once walking home on Erev Pesach, and he sees his neighbor installing a new toilet. He says, wow, such a chumrah I never thought of before. We're getting a new toilet now. Anyhow, okay, there's lots of jokes they used to say. But just to tell you, there's a couple, very quickly. Reb Chaim used to pepper his students with questions. One of the famous ones was, he said, Bochrim, imagine you have two babies that need a bris milah. One of them was born a month ago, but couldn't have its bris on time. The baby's here today, it's able to have a bris. Another baby, today is the 8th day. Which one do you do first? The male is going to do both. Which one do you do first? So all the students said the one that today is the 8th day. The other one's anyway has been pushed off. Chaim, you got it all wrong. On the 8th day, you have an entire day to do the bris. There's no urgency to do it in the morning. I did a bris, I did a dafka late. And this is based on a number of reasons, but part of this Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim said the guy that was born a month ago, he's urgent. He needs any moment, every moment that he doesn't have a bris is an oral. The urgency is by him, so you need to actually do it the other way. He asked another question. Imagine Sukkos. You have two esrogim, okay? One of them is fully kosher, but it looks like geklapto heshayna. It looks like it's a kosher esrog, but it's not muhudr, it's not beautiful. And part of the mitzvah creates harder to have a beautiful fruit. The other esrog is dazzling, it's a diamond. But it's a suffix if it's kosher. It could be what's called murkav, that it's mixed seeds between lemons and esrogim, and there's a whole debate if such an esrog is kosher. You don't know if it's kosher, but it's beautiful. The first esrog is definitely kosher, but it's not muhudr. What do? So the student said, you make a bracha, you use the kosher one, right? And then you put it down, and then you take the other one, just in case the other one is kosher, you want to do the mitzvah. Reb Chaim said, you got it wrong. If you do it that way, the moment you use the kosher one, you fulfill the mitzvah. Later on, you take the other one, you fulfill the mitzvah already. He says, you do the other way. You take the questionable one right away. In case it's kosher, you get the mitzvah. If it's not kosher, right away you take the other one. And it's not a problem of the bracha, it's not an interruption of the bracha. Because when you make a bracha, and you fulfill the mitzvah 10 minutes later, but during those 10 minutes, you're busy trying to fulfill the mitzvah, then you're good to go. So even if the esrog you took may be possible, but since you're taking it on the possibility it's kosher, it's considered you're involved in the mitzvah. He says you have to do it that way. If you do it the other way, there's no point. Now I'll tell you that Moshe Feinstein has a letter where he disagreed with this Reb Chaim. He totally disagrees. But this was a classical Reb Chaim. Hold on.
The same thing with Pidyon Ben. Start with the Sofi Kohen and then with the...
Yeah. You have any certain Kohanim?
I know many.
We had a... Depends who you go. Depends who you ask. So, so I just want to... a couple of the famous Chidushim of Reb Chaim, just to see what he brought to the table. Reb Chaim was famous for saying that there's often two things going on. There's often two dinim. There's two things going on at the same time. Often you're dealing with an issue. Reb Chaim would say there's two things going on. There's a general issue and there's a local issue. or any certain halacha, there's two things going on. There's how you're involved in it, and there's the item that you're dealing with, the gavra and the chefza. There's often a few things going on. There's the person that does the act, and then there's the act itself. Or there's the act, and then there's the result. He would often get into the core, the crux of the issue. How do you define exactly what's going on? I want to give you 3 examples. In number 14 is a vart of Reb Chaim. I'm going to finish in just a couple moments. A vart of Reb Chaim about Pesach. When it comes to chametz, Rabbi Yehuda holds chametz has to be burnt. Chachamim say hashpasasa b'chol dover. However you want, you can crumble it and throw it into the wind, crumble it and throw it into the bay. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to burn it. So Reb Chaim says there's a fundamental debate going on, and it spreads into many other areas. He says like this, Veneer, it seems to me. In number 14, Loi dami ha-mitzvah shel tashpisu. If tashpisu means hashpasasa b'chol dover, destroyed however you want, would be different than a mitzvah to burn. Why? The mitzvah of tashpisu b'sharei hashpasas, if the mitzvah is to destroy it in any way possible, it means God, there's no act of destroying. It's just make sure the chametz is no longer here. If God says, I don't care how you get rid of it, it means the actual getting rid of is not God's concern. He just wants the chametz to be gone. If God is particular to destroy it through burning, it means there's an act God wants. Haraya, he said how to do it. If he said however it goes, it's fine, it means he doesn't care how you do it. There's no act. He doesn't want an act. He'd rather it would never have been in the beginning. It's just to make sure it's not here. So he says, and he threads this through a number of issues in the chametz of Pesach, is there a mitzvah to destroy the chametz, or just to make sure there is no chametz? That was a famous chakira that he had, right? Famous Brisker chakira. And fine. Another famous one that many Chassidim...
Question of if it's on 4 levels or...
Right. You should know right. They used to say Reb Chaim used to divide things into 2 parts and the Rogatchover into 3. The Rogatchover would say that in every action there's the poil, there's the one doing it, there's the action itself, and there's the result. There's always 3 things. There's the item, the person, and then the action itself. The Rebbe actually once said apparently that a svara of the Rogatchover is a gem, a svara of Reb Chaim Brisker is gold, and then somebody else was something else. I'm going to leave that for now. I'll tell you later. Anyhow, in number 12, this is a famous Reb Chaim that Chassidim would kochen. The Rebbe brings it in a number of sichos. In number 12, Reb Chaim has a famous contradiction in the Rambam. It's talking about davening. The Rambam's number 12. The Rambam says 5 things can prevent your tefillah from fulfilling the mitzvah, even though the time has come. One of them is for your heart to have kavanah. Keitzad, the Rambam says, let me describe it to you. Any tefillah which has no kavanah is not a davening. And if you daven without kavanah, you got to daven again. Matzah daitim mishabeshes, if your mind is blurred, your mind is racing with other things, and liboy tor, you can't concentrate, you can't daven until your mind settles. Says Reb Chaim in the Mistimas in number 12, 5 lines in. From the Rambam's language, it seems that this din of kavanah applies the entire Shemoneh Esrei. Talking about Shemoneh Esrei, the entire Shemoneh Esrei. That the entire Shemoneh Esrei, your attention makes it or breaks it. The problem is the Rambam later in Perek Yud says, if you daven and didn't focus, you have to daven again. But if you focus in the first bracha, you're good to go. It's clear from there that kavanah is only an issue in the first bracha. V'tzarachin. Famous contradiction of 2 Rambams. Does the entire Shemoneh Esrei need kavanah or just the first bracha? So Reb Chaim says there's 2 types of kavanah in Shemoneh Esrei. One of them is knowing what you're saying. The other one is knowing you're standing in front of God. Knowing that you're standing in front of God applies to every single bracha. If any bracha you said spacing out, thinking about something else, it's like you never said that bracha, and your Shemoneh Esrei is blown because you're missing part of Shemoneh Esrei. Pirish Hamilus, knowing what you're saying, first bracha. He says, "V'nira loim." It seems to me there's 2 gavni, there's two intentions in davening. One of them is the kavanah of pirish advarim, what you're saying, and that's din kavanah. Pay attention. The shein is the second one is shechav, and have in mind you're standing in front of God. Look at number 13, and that's why the Rambam says On this that you need to know that you're standing in front of God. That's it, makes it or break it for the entire Shemoneh Esrei. And it's for two reasons. One reason is because if you don't think you're standing in front of God, you're misasik, you're like playing around. It's not considered that you davened. Davening means you're supplicating. If you were not thinking at all that God's in front of you, you're thinking about something else, that's not even called supplication. So it's like you didn't say it, B'chal. And then he says also that mitzvahs, when you do a mitzvah, you have to have in mind you're fulfilling the mitzvah. Those two issues apply throughout the entire Shemoneh Esrei. But Pirush Hadvarim, the translation of the words, that's the special din by davening, that we say is only an issue in the first bracha. This is the famous R Chaim. And the Rebbe quotes it, and etc., etc. It's like a Chidushim R Chaim. They used to call the Chidushim R Chaim Brisker, the word he has by davening. Number 15 is one we actually quoted a couple years ago. He explains a beautiful debate of the Rambam and Ravid. See, R Chaim Brisker loved the Rambam. The Rambam to him and to the Rogatshov as well, the Rambam was king. Those that used to harass Reb Chaim would say he loves the Rambam because the Rambam never gives reasons, so it's free. You're free to say whatever you want. You know, you can take a Rambam and say whatever you want. You don't know, because the Rambam never said anything. Once on Purim, Reb Chaim Brisker gets up. It's on Purim. Everyone's after L'chaim. He gets up. Okay, he's going to say Purim Torah, right? He gets up. He quotes a Rambam. He asks a few questions. He delivers his groundbreaking, revolutionary explanation. He answers the questions. He wraps it up and he sits down. So the Bachrim, like Rebbe, it was a great word. How is that Purim Torah? He says, you'll never believe it. There's no such Rambam. That was his Purim. That was his Purim. Anyhow, but he loved the Rambam. And in number 15, this is a great example of the Brisker Torah. The Rambam says in number 15, if someone was davening and he remembered that he already davened, whatever happens, you daven mincha, hey, all of a sudden, like I davened 5 hours ago. Poisik, you stop, even in the middle of the bracha. The Rambam, you stop cold. But if it was Ma'ariv, well, you're davening late Ma'ariv, and I just davened earlier, then you don't stop. Why? Shaloi hispalel oisa mitchila ela al das she'eino chayva. What that means is like this. Shachris or mincha, you're allowed to offer the Eibishter a gift, extra Shemoneh Esrei. It's called a nadava, a gift. But you can't do a Shemoneh Esrei half obligatory, half gift. You can't mix and match. So if you're davening Shachris and you realize, hey, I davened a few hours ago, and you're in the middle of Lamal Shinim, you can't decide, okay, the rest of Shemoneh Esrei will be a gift. Because the first half you had in mind you're doing Shachris. Only in the middle you realize you already davened. You can't mix and match. So you have to stop cold turkey. But the Rambam says, Ma'ariv is never an obligation. We paskin like Rabbi Yeshua, that Ma'ariv in essence is Rishus. So even if you're davening Ma'ariv for the second time, and in the middle you realize, hey, I davened already, you can daven the rest having in mind it's a gift. Because the whole Ma'ariv is a gift anyways, even the first time you daven. It was never a chayva. That's the Rambam's. Now the Rambam created that halacha. It's like a gut feeling. And the Ravid, Bahasagas, the Ravid critiques and says, Ein kan nachas ruach. I don't like this. Which is a very, mellow critique. He is, I'm not happy with this. Doesn't feel right. So Ayin Bekesef Mishnah, look in Rabbi Yosef Kaira, who explains, he explains what's the Ravid's problem. Because Mishum Desrile, the Ravid holds that even Tfilas Arvis, Rabbi Yeshua said it was Rishus. 2,000 years ago you could choose. But Kiblu Chayva, over time we accept as obligation. Nowadays you got to daven Ma'ariv. And therefore, Dino Shepaisa, you have to stop in the middle of the bracha. The Ravid says these days Ma'ariv is like Shachris and Mincha. When you daven Ma'ariv, it's basically an obligation. So when you do it the second time and you realize in the middle I davened already, you have the same problem as Shachris and Mincha. The first half you did thinking it was obligation. So says the Reb Chaim, no, let me explain to you the Rambam. This is a classic Brisker Torah. You have to distinguish between the person davening and the davening itself. Now, although the davening is not really a physical existence, but it's an existence. Shachris and Mincha, the davening itself is an obligation, instituted by the Ovis or by by Ezra, etc. Ma'ariv, the davening in essence, the tefillah as an item is discretionary. It's rishus. Over time, the Jewish people accepted upon themselves that we're going to make sure to daven Ma'ariv. But it's an obligation on the person. It doesn't change the essence of Ma'ariv. That's Pshat in the Rambam. So although we take it upon ourselves never to miss a Ma'ariv, that's our business. Ma'ariv itself, in essence, the chefs of this was discretionary. So therefore, when the Ma'ariv is always Rishus, so therefore, if you realize in the middle of the second, I davened 2 hours ago, you can still finish the Shemoneh Esrei. You can mix and match. Because the second half will be a gift, and the first half was basically a gift too. Whereas the Ravid holds that the tefillah itself changed. So he says, this that we say that choiv and adava, that the obligation and the gift don't join, is because they're chalukin be'etzem hachefta. This is, by the way, Reb Chaim's own handwriting. Most of Reb Chaim's Torahs that he said, he never wrote down. We have one small sefer, Reb Chaim al Rambam, which was the choicest of the choicest. Everything else he left for his Talmidim to explore, but he didn't want to write it down. In fact, look at number 11. I'm sorry for throwing you around, but number 11, Reb Chaim Brisker had a student called Reb Isser Zalman Meltzer. Reb Isser Zalman Meltzer, who was the father-in-law of Rebbe Kotler, but Isser Zalman Meltzer, was actually had a bit of a soft spot towards Chassidus. I know this because he lived in Yerushalayim the end of his life. He had a yeshiva, and at some point they forbid learning Tanya. They forbade to learn Tanya in the yeshiva. And the Rebbe has a letter where he says, I don't believe that prohibition came from Isser Zalman. He wouldn't have, must be from somewhere else. He wouldn't have prohibited it. This Rabbi Isser Zalman Meltzer once asked, look at number 11. Once Rabbi Isser Zalman Meltzer asked Rabbi Yitzchak Zev Soloveitchik, that's Rabbi Chaim's son, the Griz, the Brisker Rav, how come you don't print more the Chidushim of your father? We barely have anything. And people remember so much. So the Griz said in a Brisker humor, you sat by my father when my father used to write. I sat by him when he used to erase. When he used to erase. Reb Chaim was so meticulous, so perfect. You know, it's like Rabbi Yoel Khan and Sefer Erchim of Chassidus just took forever because everything had to be so perfect, and you're never happy. I work on a bit more, I'll always get better and better. So from Reb Chaim, you have very, very little. So, but back in number 15, you have Reb Chaim's words where he just says, you have the chefts of the davening, the davening itself, you can't mix and match if one's a gift and one's an obligation. But the fact that we accepted upon ourselves to daven Ma'ariv, it means we accepted on ourselves. But the tefillah ba'atz musa, the object of the davening is still discretionary. And therefore, the Rambam says that if you're doing a second Ma'ariv and you realize in the middle, you could finish it off. The second half is Nadava, a gift. Well, the first half basically was too. It's discretionary. You have to daven Ma'ariv. That's my business, not Ma'ariv's business. A classical Brisker Chakira, and he was famous for creating this whole new path of learning. He had some great students. Rabbi Isser Zalman Meltzer, we said. Reb Baruch Ber Leibovitz, who the Friedrich Rebbe wrote beautiful things about him. Reb Baruch Ber was one of the greatest students of Reb Chaim, and he taught Torah, a whole new generation. And Reb Chanan Wasserman was a student of Reb Chaim. What's interesting is that the big students of Reb Chaim had a nice relationship with Chabad on the whole. But Reb Chanan Wasserman, he was killed Nebuch by the Nazis. And he had a son called Reb Simcha Wasserman who came to California. And if Rabbi Shachar was here, he would correct me on the story, but his brother, the Rosh, was in California, and he was sent there by the Rebbe to go to California, a spiritual wasteland, and bring Torah there. And Rabbi Shachar went like a soldier, and he was going to take this. Reb Simcha Wasserman had set up a yeshiva. The Rosh was going to take that yeshiva, and Reb Simcha said, on condition that the yeshiva has my father's name, Reb Chanan Wasserman. So Rabbi Shachar wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe, I don't know the exact lashon, but the Rebbe apparently said that we're very happy, even though it's a Tomchei Tmimim, we're very happy to have the name of Reb Chanan Wasserman, and it's called today Ur El Chanan, till today. So it's interesting, Reb Chaim Brisker's students had a bit of a warm relationship to Chabad because Reb Chaim was a friend of the Rebbe Rashab and the Friedrich Rebbe. Hold on, and of course Reb Levik went to get smicha by Reb Chaim. Reb Levik went to get smicha by Reb Chaim Brisker. Yeah.
Why was
And
it
Reb,
so important for him to go? It was like a big deal for him
Yeah.
to go here. Why was it so important to go to him?
Reb Chaim Brisker was the world scholar. What? Yeah, very prestigious. He was the world scholar. And also it helps, Reb Chaim should see that more Lubavitchers know how to learn. Yeah, exactly. You know that the Rebbe Rashab wanted Reb Chaim Brisker to be the Rosh Yeshiva in Lubavitch in Tomchei Tmimim. For some reason didn't work out. But he was, so the famous story, so when Reb Chaim would give smicha, he wouldn't just test you what you learned. Any questions that came into the office that day, he would discuss. And the question came in, the famous question about during Sukkot, people are living in the same courtyard and they're surrounded by proper mechitzas, but in order to carry, there needs to be food in one designated space for all of them. They forgot to do that. And the Levik said the fact that they all eat in the same sukkah, that itself is considered one designated spot. And Reb Chaim said, Reb Levik, such a good cup, and you're throwing it on Kabbalah. And the Rebbe quoted this and laughed. And it brings to mind the letter from the Rivosh, one of the last of the Rishonim, who quotes from his Rebbe, the Ran, the great Ran, who was commenting on the Ramban, that the Ramban, although the Ramban earlier in life laughed on Kabbalah, later he became a major Kabbalist. And the Ran said that the Ramban, he went overboard. He made such a 180, he went overboard in Kabbalah. In other words, the other Rishonim looked at the Ramban and said, it's great, he went way too far in Kabbalah. You know, and it's mamash like Reb Chaim Brisker's comment on it, such a good cup, you're going way too far in Kabbalah. Anyhow, but listen, we love Reb Chaim Brisker's Taanis, and there's actually often more Sfarim coming out, because there's so much that was remembered by people and written in manuscripts and personal memories that his Torah really created, because it was so rich, it was fresh, it was new, it was dazzling, it was sharp. And that's why he's one of the most famous Rosh Yeshivas the past 200 years. And like I said, he was the Rosh Yeshiva of Rosh Yeshivas. Okay, Shekayach.